joints creaking under the excessive gravity, fingertips gripping the void, the boundary between self and others blurring uncertainly in the twilight, whose shadow is entwining around your feet. The ghost that claims to be independent is blown by the night wind with no place to go, creaking the bones of dependence. Once those who believed in the myth of standing alone step into the darkness, even their own shadows become iron chains that bind them. And the illusion of independence burns sweetly on the tip of the tongue of those who have swallowed their dependence. The body that cannot stand without something to lean on is frightened of not being able to lean on anything, sharpening its fangs and tearing at the sky. At the end of wandering, the tingle that seeps through the gap between solitude and coexistence is the pain of shaking off dependence. It is a new fetter in the name of independence. Soon the footprints disappear in the wind, and the shadows dissolve into the night. There is only one thing left. The only thing left is the wandering, the fanged wandering and its whereabouts. Solitude is the proof of independence, the end of dependence. Does the one who stands alone really walk on his own feet? Trapped in a cage in the name of independence, they dream of freedom and deny their bondage. On the day they vow to stand on their own will without seeking someone else's gaze, the shadows lengthen and the uneasiness that settles behind them whispers. Independence that can only be proven by rejecting dependence, and dependence that deepens by flaunting one's independence. The two-headed serpents, in direct contradiction, entwine, feed on each other, and eventually bleed from the same wound. Wandering continues. Each time they wield their fangs, they know that the sharpness of their fangs will pierce their hearts, and yet they cannot stop their progress. Wearing a veneer of self-reliance, yet their feet sink in the shadows of others. The path that he was surely supposed to take was unconsciously laid out as a guideline for others' expectations. When mixed with the sound of the chain that binds us, true independence becomes an illusion, and at the end of our wanderings it bears its fangs. I bite off the rope of dependence. But will you be able to endure the loneliness that spreads out beyond it? The moment when dependent independence finally breaks its fangs, will all those who are deprived of their feet sink to the end of dependence? We are creatures that struggle to escape the shadows of others while stepping into their shadows. The blade that cuts through the web of dependence is actually forged from dependence itself. It is perhaps the wavering itself that wanders between the two that bears its fangs. Total independence is a mirage. Complete dependence is a shadow of a tombstone. Whichever direction one walks, there is always the gaze of others entangled in one's path, and to continue walking while being touched by their gaze is probably what we call wandering. Then, to continue wandering is the only freedom that is born between dependence and independence. We need others to tame our loneliness, but if we think we are standing by leaning on others, it is nothing more than a dance of shackles that does not know how to walk. The proof of being alone is not achieved by the absence of others, but depends on where one sets the axis of one's world. But if even that axis is given to you by someone else, then independence is only a temporary concept, and the shadow of dependence will bite back and eat away at your feet. On the journey in search of freedom, when we fail to discern whether the direction indicated by someone else's words is our own choice, or an illusion tuned by someone else's hand, wandering ends up as wandering. While frightened by loneliness, one does not blindly believe in loneliness. While rejecting dependence, one does not deny dependence. Only at this moment the self assumes the self. But if we can be sure that the steps we take are our own, then we are not wandering. Whenever we stand on the crumbling equilibrium and step on the shadow of independence, the warmth of dependence creeps in. In the palm of my hand, which I swore to be solitary, many nameless threads entwine. Freedom not sought becomes a cage. Freedom sought too much becomes a craving. Every time I look back, the shadows laugh at me. Torn between dependence and independence on a road that will never return, we continue to walk.